Ah, Smart Water, now in a sleek can.
This feels cool, literally.
Perfect for social gatherings and on the go.
Should I start wearing turtlenecks?
One sip at a time, friend. Smart Water cans, for those with a taste for taste. Get yours today.
This is the Roger Stone Show, presented by Colonial Metals Group.
A man who's gone through hell, but he's kept going, and he's smart, and he's strong, and people love him. Not everybody, but people love him and respect him. Roger Stone.
Now, here's Roger Stone.
No, it is not Roger Stone. It is Frank Morano, his friend and colleague of a friend of a quarter century, a colleague of late. But you're in luck, because even if I don't have anything insightful to say, I guarantee you Batya Ungar-Sargon does. If you're unfamiliar with Batya Ungar-Sargon, she is the opinion editor at Newsweek. She's also the author of the book Second Class: How the Elites Betrayed America's Working Class Men and Women. And aside from being someone that's very intelligent and with in a general very cheery disposition, she has expertise on a number of different issues, both domestic political issues, geopolitical issues, foreign policy issues. And she actually goes out and talks to people, which shockingly gives her a much better idea what average everyday Americans think about what's going on in Washington, as opposed to other colleagues of hers who just stay into their normal political bubble. And she's also one of the few guests that I've had. Usually you have a guest on that will express strong opinions, especially about the Middle East, and you'll have people who agree with that person say, oh, that was the greatest guest you ever had, and the people that disagree say, oh, I can't believe you had that person on. She is one of the few guests I've ever had that no matter where you fall on the political spectrum, you end up impressed with Batya Ungar-Sargon's analysis and her capability of being a wonderful communicator. Batya, it is great to talk with you again. Appreciate you joining me.
Oh my gosh, Frank, I'm so humbled by that. Thank you so much for having me. It is such a pleasure to be here with you and your listeners.
Well, it's my pleasure, and I know you're very much in demand inauguration weekend, so I appreciate you making some time for me. Let's get in first to the situation we're going to be observing tomorrow. I thought there was a good chance that Donald Trump was going to win. I didn't think there was a chance that he was going to win the popular vote. I certainly didn't think he was likely to win every single swing state. I thought he'd win the election maybe, but I view this as, a pretty impressive mandate, even if others may disagree. You kind of saw this coming. You did a lot of interviews for your book, Second Class: How the Elites Betrayed America's Working Class Men and Women. And a lot of the folks that you spoke to seemed to portend the Trump victory. Something tells me you weren't at all surprised.
Yeah, I had this feeling that he was going to win in a landslide. I mean, I never thought he was going to win the popular vote for a Republican. To do that, that's huge. But I had a feeling that he was going to do very well because I knew a lot of people. I'd interviewed a lot of people for my book who were Democrats historically, but who just could no longer deny that the economy that Trump had built was so much better for them. And, the first time round, the media did such a good job of just lying on Trump and portraying him as racist and homophobic and sexist and all of these things. And all of that just started to fall apart during the Biden administration when it became clear how little the Democrats cared about average people. And suddenly a lot of regular people who never would have voted for Republican before started looking at the way in which Trump had very intentionally crafted an economy that did what the Democrats always promised to do but never did, meaning like an economy that raised all ships, kind of like a rising tide. And working people can point to the exact policies he put in place that really made their wages go up for the first time in a generation. So like a lot of the lies started to fall apart. And I think, just as the Biden administration and term wore on, the lying that the media was doing on behalf of Joe Biden was so naked and obvious that people started to go back and say, wait, what if they were lying to me this whole time about who Trump is? And I think that was like, it was like this weird watershed where people started to just not believe anything, any of the lies that they were being told that they'd believed before. And his support just grew and grew and grew. People went back to the policies of first administration and said, wait a minute, we actually want less immigration. We actually want less free trade, you know? And then they went back and said, actually, he kind of was pretty pro-gay. Like, he had a lot of gay people in his cabinet. Actually, he wasn't racist. He released 5,000 black men from prison, you know? I'm like, wait a minute. Actually, he's pretty pro-union. And then suddenly, like, there was just this, basically, the man that the media told us was the great divider unified the American working class of all races around the idea of the American dream. And I think that's what we really saw.
You know, you sort of anticipated my next question. My question was going to be, why do working class people who may have a difficult time making ends meet, why do they relate to someone who's a billionaire, who didn't grow up poor, who grew up very much a child of privilege, was Ivy League educated, and if you dates supermodels and hangs out with the super wealthy and celebrities? My question was going to be why they relate more to him than some other politicians with more conventional blue-collar roots and a blue-collar background. But it sounds like the reason that it's less about stylistically relating to him and more about substantively related to him and his policies.
Oh, 100%. I mean, I think in the end of the campaign, it really became clear when he did the McDonald's stint and the garbage truck stint, how much he loves working class people, working class culture, like how much he relates to them. But I don't think that's why people voted for him. I think they felt that he couldn't be bought, and they are right that he can't be bought. Like, they were right about that. And, you know, the fact that he was so rich made him be able to take on not just the elites of the Democratic Party, but the elites of the Republican Party. I mean, you saw he made quick work of that Project 2025. He basically humiliated them and said, actually, this doesn't represent me. This doesn't represent American voters. This is not what I'm going to do. Forget that. He took on the donor class. Wall Street, for the third time in a row, sided with the Democrats over the Republican because they can't stand Donald Trump because he doesn't believe in what they believe in. He doesn't believe in screwing over workers for the bottom line of the oligarchs. Honestly, we're going to see this come to a head with Elon Musk and the whole H-1B visa fight, and we could talk about that if you want. But I would say they don't relate to Trump. They think that he put in place very intentionally an economic agenda that was tailor-made to protect the value of the labor of the American worker, as opposed to the free market right or the distributionist left. So what the Democrats want for an economy is basically like all of their base is now the college educated. So what they want is for their base to be working in the knowledge industry, making, you know, $250,000, $500,000 a year, for all manufacturing to be shipped to China and done by slaves in China, and for all service industry jobs that remain here to be done by a slave caste imported by cartels from like failed socialist states, right? That's the economy that the Democrats built over the last 40 years. On the right, before Trump, what you had was the sort of trickle-down version where basically it was free trade and tax cuts for the rich and a very pro-corporation mentality. And then there as well, the working class kind of got cut out of the picture. And Trump said, we're not doing either of those things. We're not going to have free trade with China, which is our greatest adversary, but we're also not going to do this redistribution that the Democrats like, where their rich people get richer and richer and richer, and they get higher and higher taxes, and then we take those taxes and give it to working class people and sort of pay them off because their jobs no longer pay with the American dream. No, Trump said we're not doing any of that. We're going to look at who is the American worker and how do I protect the value of their labor? How do I make their wages go up? And the way that you do that is, number one, by limiting the supply of labor, by closing the border. Suddenly, every working class person has immeasurably more negotiating power because they have less competition, right? It's the most obvious thing. And then second, with trade, with tariffs, we're going to make it expensive for companies to ship their manufacturing overseas to be done by slaves. We're going to make it cheaper for them to stay here. And that was really the two things that I heard the most from working class people, that this is how he made my wages go up.
Very interesting. You know, I voted for Trump. Excuse me. I voted for Trump, but I have a lot of friends and family members that are not Trump supporters at all, and a lot of listeners that are not Trump supporters at all. And honestly, I prefer it that way. I like people getting together, and I like learning from people that may view the situation differently than I do. And, you know, I would say 9 times out of 10, the points that they bring up causes me to, you know, think differently about my own position. I mean, sometimes people are just haters and will disagree with something because Trump was for it. But I really do try to spend a lot of time talking with folks that view the world differently than I do. And one of the things that I hear from a lot of Trump critics, especially Democratic Trump critics, is that essentially Trump has been able to engineer this gigantic con on the working class. Sure, he speaks the language of the working class on different things like McDonald's, different cultural issues. He speaks the way normal people speak. But what does he do once he gets office? He pushes through a massive tax cut that the overwhelming beneficiaries of which are the top 1%. He's pushing through tariffs, which might, if the naysayers are correct, raise prices for this very same working class people that love him, and not necessarily really doing anything to improve access to health care in a lot of very red states where they don't necessarily have the best access to health care. Speak to those Democratic criticisms of Trumponomics, if you would.
Okay, so there's 3 things you brought up. The tax cuts, tariffs, and then healthcare. I would say on the healthcare, I think they're right. That's the only thing I think he's vulnerable to. And I hope that, you know, in bringing in RFK Jr., this signals a real interest on behalf of Republicans to take seriously the question of healthcare, because the number one thing I found when I was traveling around the country interviewing working class people was that the vast majority of them, whether they vote for Democrats or Republicans, want much less immigration and much more access to health care. So the first party that gets to that combination is going to have a ruling majority for a very long time. And, you know, if the Republicans want to cede that ground to Democrats, at some point the Democrats are going to find their way back to being, you know, restrictionist on immigration. It might take 10 years, it might take 20 years, but it's going to happen, and they already have the health care piece. So I would urge Republicans to take that very seriously. Mm-hmm. You cannot have, you know, a healthy, civilized workforce when people feel like they can't afford adequate health care. So that's the only one I think, you know, they may have a point. The other 2 I think are total nonsense. First of all, the tax cuts, you know, yeah, rich people got tax cuts, but you know who got, 3-4 times more in terms of percentages of tax cuts is the working class and the middle class, who got between 15 and 25% tax cuts compared to between 1 and 5% of tax cuts for the super rich, for the 1%. So of course, if you're in the 1% and you get a 5% tax cut, that's going to be a lot more money in total than if you are making $80,000 a year and you get a $20% tax cut. But if you're making $80,000 a year and you get a 20% tax cut, that means a lot more to you. And that's why working class people, they really don't have class resentment against the billionaires. They're not like, you know, the rentier, over-credentialed college elites who loathe the billionaires because they feel so much class resentment that they don't get to fly, you know, in private jets. They have to settle for first class and business class, right? Working class people don't think that way. They see billionaires as jobs creators, and they often admire them the way they admire Trump. So I think that tax cut thing is patently false. In terms of tariffs, you know what China did when Trump slapped 25% tariffs on them? You know, they did what every economist says they would never do.
Right, they lowered their prices.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I'm so glad you said that, Frank, because people just pretend they didn't do that. They dropped their prices by 25% because, of course, China has an industrial economy.
Right. They still want access to American consumers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They have to just keep those factories going no matter what. And by the way, they raised prices on Europe by 25%.
You know, I am pro-tariff, just to be clear, whether it's Democrats like Bernie Sanders proposing it or conservatives like Donald Trump or Pat Buchanan proposing it. But you've heard the anti-tariff argument before, I'm sure. So that's why I bring it up.
Yeah.
Batya, before, I want to get your take on the Middle East, but before I do, two-part question. Well, actually, look, I'm getting a little carried away. I'm thinking it's overnights, and I still have 4 hours to speak all night. Let me limit it to one question. Are there Democrats on the scene today who speak in terms of both issues and stylistically in a way that appeals to working class voters? For instance, if the Democrats had nominated blank, maybe they would have had a better showing with working class voters in this past election. And if they nominate blank in 2028, perhaps they'll be able to win back some of these blue collar voters.
Well, I think Bernie Sanders and John Fetterman are the two people who come to mind. I don't think either of them is electable as president. John Fetterman because of his disability, unfortunately, and Bernie Sanders because he's so old. But they are the people to be watching as influencers. If the Democratic Party looks to them as the model, that's the future for them. If they don't, if they look to, Gretchen Whitmer or Gavin Newsom or Pete Buttigieg, these are the losers of the party, and this is going to be a disaster for them and very, very good for the MAGA wing. You have to understand whoever they pick is going to be going up against the second most talented politician that the Republicans have seen in a generation, who is J.D. Vance. And he's young, and he's brilliant, and he's a very effective communicator. They really have to be – it's amazing. I'm sure you noticed this, Frank, but the whole nomination of Trump's cabinet, all of the hearings this week, these are young, good-looking, vigorous people in their 40s and 50s. I mean, the bench is wide, and it's full of talent. And who do the Democrats have? I mean, it's very hard to sort of point to somebody and say, like, okay, this is who they should be elevating. I think Ruben Gallego would be really good. He's done a real 180 on immigration.
Batya, I have to. Hey, you have 4 minutes. You want to hang around 4 minutes? I have to ask you about the Middle East, and I'm out of time here. Can you hang? Okay, great. Batya Ungar-Sargon is going to stick around a few minutes. I want to get her take on this Middle East deal. If you want to comment on any portion of our conversation, you can give me a call, 646-720-0635, 646-720-0635. We'll continue with Batya Ungar-Sargon straight ahead.
This episode is brought to you by Temptations Cat Treats. Your cat will come running for the perfectly irresistible Temptations Creamy Puree and Temptations Lickable Spoon Cat Treats. The best time to feed lickable cat treats to your cat is anytime. Feed by hand for a playful moment, in a bowl for a creamy treat, or as a topper to make mealtime fun. Visit TemptationsTreats.com to learn more.
Parents of tweens, if you're familiar with far-off drop-offs...
Dad, stop, right here.
Or get DMs about what's for dinner, you may be experiencing tween milestones. For your son or daughter, these can start at age 9. HPV vaccination, a type of cancer prevention against certain HPV-related cancers, can start then too.
For most, HPV clears on its own. But for those who don't clear the virus, it can cause certain cancers later in life.
Embrace this phase. Help protect them in the next.
Ask their doctor today about HPV vaccination. Brought to you by Merck.
We off? 30 seconds of carefree bliss.
Oof, like wind in your hair carefree.
Oh, like using Clorox Disinfecting All-Purpose Cleaner in the home carefree.
Yes.
Like dog slobbing on the coffee table and cleaning it with Clorox Carefree.
He's on a roll now.
Spit toothpaste on the faucet.
You got it.
Peanut butter on the light switch.
Oh, spritz.
Spritz. Clorox, man. Clean feels good.
Okay, we're back.
Use as directed.
Running a business comes with a lot of what-ifs. But luckily, there's a simple answer to them. Shopify. It's the commerce platform behind millions of businesses, including Thrive Cosmetics and Momofuku. And it'll help you with everything you need. From website design and marketing to boosting sales and expanding operations, Shopify can get the job done and make your dream a reality. Turn those what-ifs into... Sign up for your $1 per month trial at shopify.com/special offer.
Richard Nixon, Ronald Reagan, George W. Bush, and Donald Trump.
They went after a guy named Roger Stone, who's sitting in the office. And I'll say this in front of Roger, he's no baby. And right now, he's cleaner than anybody in this place. No, they treated him very unfairly.
All of these presidents relied on one man to secure their seat in the Oval Office. That man is Roger Stone.
Roger Stone.
This is the Roger Stone Show, presented by Colonial Metals Group. Now, here's Roger Stone.
No, it's not Roger Stone. It's Frank Morano. We've been talking with Batya Ungar-Sargon. You got to check out her book. It's called Second Class, How the Elites Betrayed America's Working Class Men and Women. We only have 2 minutes here, Batya, but I have to ask you your thoughts on the Gaza ceasefire deal. What do you think of the deal in general? And do you think this is a ceasefire that's going to hold?
You know, I'm one of the very few people who thinks it's a good deal. I think when barbarians invade your homeland and rape your women and steal your women, you have to get your women back, and they're getting their women back. And I just feel like I have no words to thank Donald Trump for this, because obviously never would have happened without him. You know, if Biden had been, or Kamala Harris had been elected on November 5th, there would be no hope for these hostages. So it's just an unbelievable moment. I'm so grateful to God and to Donald Trump that this actually happened. Steve Witkoff did an amazing job. He had to bully both the Qataris and Bibi Netanyahu, who did not want to say yes to the deal. Hamas's capabilities are deeply, deeply degraded, and I don't know why everybody's acting like that's not the case. October 7th happened because Israel misunderstood where the threat was coming from. They thought it was coming from Hezbollah and from the north, and we saw how prepared they were to take on Hezbollah. They decimated them in 2 weeks. They took their eye off the border because they thought Hamas was not a threat. It is a threat. Okay. They know how to police a border. They just weren't doing it. So I think that as long as we can get through the three.
Plan on flying? It's time to upgrade to a Real ID. Because in order to board domestic flights, your driver's license or state-issued ID must be a Real ID, or you'll need another acceptable form of identification. So don't wait. Find out how to get your Real ID at tsa.gov/Real ID. That's tsa.gov/Real ID, or visit your local DMV. And then you'll be cleared for takeoff.